Hello everyone, welcome back to Drama Fan. Episode 14 is really great. One of the best episodes so far. I cried while watching it. Because I can totally feel Donwal's pain. When he never expresses his feelings to Hye Suk and now Hye Suk is gone, I think he regrets it the most. Where he has considered Hye Suk as his daughter. He even cried. That's why he told Song-eun to go because they became a burden for him. But actually we know that he was just scared to lose them. It seems that Song-eun understands Donwal's feelings, that's why she came back. After trying to convince Donwal, she said she will protect him. So Donwal doesn't have to go through all this alone. Song-eun invites Donwal to come with her. So Song-eun will take Donwal to the car, and they will move to a new location because their current home location is not safe. I think they will move because Siho and Do-eun are in the car waiting for Song-eun to invite Donwal to come with them. And I am so relieved that both Siho and Do-eun are alive. It seems that in episode 15, Donwal was shopping for necessities with Do-eun. As far as we know, there is nothing around Donwal's house. Which means they have moved to a new place. Maybe this was done because they had to recover from their injury. Where everyone gets hurt. Also, it will take some time for Ulted to find them. It seems that when Donwal went out with Do-eun to go shopping, he saw a girl he knew from living in the same village in the past. It seems that when he sees the girl, he remembers Hye Suk's words that people who crossed paths in the past will continue to see each other. Like they were meeting each other again now. Based on this, I think everyone will cross paths with each other again after they are reincarnated, not only those who have ill-fated relationships. So everyone who reunited with him has nothing to do with the ill-fated relationship. And what I realized is that people who are reincarnated in this time have the same character as their lives in the past. At the present time, looks like Donwal's eyes have recovered. There is a possibility that Song-eun feels uncomfortable with Donwal, who continues to feel the pain of losing someone he loves. Where he can't die even if he wants to. So Song-eun wants to end all the things that they started. So Song-eun will tell Donwal to take back his soul from her. But Donwal doesn't want to because it means Song-eun has to die. So Song-eun threatens Donwal by pointing a knife at her neck that she will do it herself if Donwal doesn't want to. I think Song-eun will end up hurting her neck, and she wants to end this by trying to kill herself. But Donwal immediately prevented this from happening. After that they will return home to treat Song-eun's wound. And Donwal will call Ulted to meet again at Donwal's well. Finally they will meet up, and it looks like Donwal will apologize to Ulted because everything Ulted did was based on his orders. And Ulted will ask if Donwal has his memories from 1,000 years ago. But Donwal will explain that it was Song-eun who told him that he saw Ulted save him in the past life. And Song-eun who has started to regain her memory. Like Hye Suk told Ulted before, the evil spirit opened the dark hole. And now, it is coming to close it. The soul will go back to its owner. So I think Donwal went to see Ulted because he wanted to end Ulted. Maybe he doesn't want Ulted to do evil things, so he can reincarnate and live a normal life. Donwal tries to kill Ulted, but I think Donwal will lose again. Because when Song-eun came to the well, all she could see was Ulted who was covered in blood on his face. I think Song-eun came to that place because she was worried about Donwal, and it could be that she got her memories back in the past. It turns out that Donwal has been used by Ulted. And because of Ulted, Donwal and Song-eun were enemies in the past. Based on episode 13, Donwal and Song-eun have a harmonious relationship. There is a possibility that Song-eun has a new memory at that time. About Donwal standing here alone. And it was Ulted who manipulated Donwal that Song-eun liked the life of being a human and could leave and betray him. That's why in episode 13, Donwal is worried about Song-eun who has been infatuated with children, and he is afraid she could leave him. Maybe his worries were compounded by Ulted trying to manipulate them. Which results in Donwal and Song-eun betraying each other. As you can see, it looks like Donwal and Song-eun were a Bulgasal couple in the past. It could be that Song-eun received a report from Ulted that Donwal was afraid of the existence of humans who could snatch Song-eun from him, thus making him kill everyone in the village. So Song-eun believes in this. But I believe that Donwal's character in the past is the same as he is in the present. As he said in episode 14, he will kill the person who hurt his family. Which means he was a good person and wouldn't just kill anyone. So it's possible that Ulte told the people in the village that Songun and Donwal were Bulgasal. Which means they cannot die, besides that they are living by drinking human blood. Makes Songun and Donwal dangerous and could kill them. After hearing this, the people in the village burn Songun and Donwal's place. When Donwal comes home, he sees everything burned down and can't find Songun. That's why Donwal is standing here alone. Maybe that's why Donwal killed everyone in the village and Songun who woke up saw Donwal killed everyone. Looks like the people in the village tried to hurt Songun and Donwal killed them because of that. But Songun doesn't know this and instead blames Donwal for killing the people. That's why Songun tries to kill Donwal. After that Donwal will be stabbed by the people with the swords and Songun will run away from the village. Based on episode 14, I think Songun and Donwal are Bulgasal. Because Songun has black hands and Songun's originally black eyes also turn red when she tries to kill Donwal. Looks like Donwal can't die because he's a Bulgasal. However, he took Ulte's soul which allowed him to die and reincarnate as a human. Because as we know Bulgasal cannot die, and it makes them unable to reincarnate as human. So Donwal himself gave the Bulgasal curse to himself and made Ulte half Bulgasal because he took Ulte's soul and directly cursed Ulte with the dark hole. With this curse, Ulte must fulfill his promise with Donwal to make him Bulgasal after he reincarnates as a human. There is a possibility that Donwal decides to die because he has been betrayed and wants to take his revenge on Songun in the future. So Ulte purposely brought Songun 600 years ago so that Donwal could turn into Bulgasal. However, I think Songun knew about this and she volunteered to turn Donwal into Bulgasal. Since when she did that, she doesn't look like she is satisfied that she can reincarnate as human. Some more, when Donwal was young, she saved Donwal. Means she still cares about him. About Ulte, it was Ulte who killed Donwal's family because he had a grudge with Donwal, who made him have a miserable life with a dark hole. And by killing Donwal's family, he can manipulate that Songun killed his family. Make them hate each other and make it easy for him to get back his soul from Donwal. After that he might turn into a Bulgasal who can't die. Back to the present. After seeing Ulte covered in blood, Songun will try to run away from Ulte because she indirectly knows that Ulte has beaten Donwal. But here I am very confused because as we know that Donwal is stronger and he also knows Ulte's weakness. Maybe Ulte told Donwal that he has his people on guard to kill Siho, Doyun, and Detective Kwan if they didn't hear any news from Ulte. Which means Ulte can't die, so can't use his powers to kill Ulte. Back to Songun and Ulte. While running away, Songun decides to confront Ulte, and this could be her chance to kill Ulte. So Songun will try to kill Ulte with the knife she is holding. However, Ulte will use his power as Bulgasal, and it will make Songun nosebleed. However, Ulte himself will be in pain, because if Songun is injured, he will also feel the effects. Plus the effects of dark holes will make him suffer even more. That's why there is Ulte here who looks suffering and bleeding. So that in the end Ulte will suffer from the pain, and Songun can escape and check on Donwal's condition. That's it for this video. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you on the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.